Good evening and welcome to NDTV. I am Ankit Tyagi, starting with our focus this evening on the continuous battle, the conflict which is going on in the Middle East between Israel and the Hamas elements in Gaza. Now, at this moment, today is the day 23, ladies and gentlemen, since that terror attack by Hamas militants, the gunmen, those who stormed, in fact, inside Israel and created havoc there. The death count in Israel crossed 1,400. But as the day and the war progressed, there is absolute catastrophe, human catastrophe that we are witnessing on the Gaza Strip, one of the most densely populated area across the globe. On day 23, more than 8,000 deaths have been recorded on the Gaza Strip amidst the global outcry of citizens and the collective punishment that Israel at this moment is inflicting on the Gaza Strip. The Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has now warned that the war against Hamas is going to be a long and difficult one. He described the situation as an existential test for Israel. Went on to call this as the second stage of the war and also said that this is, in fact, he likened it with the second war of independence for Israel. Meanwhile, United Nations has said that thousands more civilians could die in Gaza as Israeli ground forces continue to operate. Their area of expansion, as far as the ground forces are concerned, now expanding within the Hamas-controlled territory as we enter day 23 of this conflict. The UN has warned possible catastrophic consequences of large-scale ground operation in Gaza. As Gaza literally turns into a battlefield, pounded every single day. Israel, now what they call 450 Hamas-related targets, but there are civilian population, residential houses which have also been targeted by the Israeli Air Force and the striking agents. Now, the bigger question is, where does this entire conflict go from here? Remember, a very important resolution on this conflict was brought in the United Nations. India, along with 45 members, has abstained. It has India also now, walking a very, very diplomatic tightrope as far as Israel and Palestine is concerned.
המלחמה בתוככי הרצועה תהיה קשה וארוכה, ואנחנו ערוכים לכך. זאת מלחמת העצמאות השנייה שלנו. נילחם על הגנת המולדת. נילחם ולא ניסוג. נילחם ביבשה, בים ובאוויר. נשמיד את האויב מעל הקרקע ומתחת לקרקע. נילחם וננצח. יהיה זה ניצחון של הטוב על הרע, של האור על החושך, של החיים על המוות.
Meanwhile, as Hamas and Israel war escalates, just to try and understand what are the challenges on the ground, my colleague Ghazali looks at this in detail about what could Israel, in fact, be looking at when they try and tackle this entire problem.
The Israeli Defense Forces have now entered into the Gaza Strip, and in this segment we are trying to explain that what are going to be the operational challenges for IDF. The first major challenge would be to tackle the threat from underground tunnels. The warren of tunnels, nicknamed Gaza Metro, allows Hamas to stockpile arms and ammunition and also helps Hamas member to flee in any crisis. But the most important part of this underground tunnel is that it will help Hamas to launch surprise attacks. Now the threat will not just be from beneath the ground, but it will be from above as well. Enemy forces are not only in front of attackers but can also threaten them from above by utilizing surrounding buildings. Buildings, whether standing or destroyed, can help Hamas for surprise attacks. Besides that, booby traps, including sophisticated improvised explosive devices, ambushes and snipers, are other means to be used by Hamas terrorists. Soldiers will be tasked with the dangerous mission of clearing Gaza street by street as they attempt to rid the territory of estimated 50,000 Hamas terrorists. Now this will be the biggest challenge because it is part of the urban warfare where IDF will be expected to get into a street-to-street fight with Hamas terrorists, which is going to be very tough. Now the most important part of this operation is the safety of hostage. The biggest challenge will be the hostage safety. The actual number of hostages in Gaza is changing almost every day. It's not only Hamas which has abducted Israeli civilians or citizens, but there are other offshore groups which also claim to have Israeli citizens in their captivity. And with heavy bombardment and intense ground incursion, the safety of hostage will be a big challenge. The last and the most important part is the heavy casualty, because limiting collateral damage and civilian casualties will be a major challenge for the IDF in this operation, as well as for the troops, because Israel will never like to get into another hostage situation. The ethos of Israeli defense forces are very clear that they don't leave their men behind, and this operation is being launched to ensure that all the hostages, which is as of now more than 220, should be brought back to Israel safely. And amid all this bombardment and ground operations, their safety and to retrieve them back safely would be the biggest challenge.
So amidst all these challenges, where we are at and how this conflict is expected to expand in the days to come, let's just try and decode that. We are being joined by Prabhu Dayal, former ambassador, keeps a very clean eye as far as India's stand and the diplomatic response so far has been in this conflict. We also are being joined from Tel Aviv, Dr. Kinraj Jahangir, currently visiting faculty at Ben Gurion University in Israel. We are also, in fact, at this moment being joined by Syed Ruman Hashmi, Middle East expert and senior journalist who is with us this evening. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us on the broadcast. I just want to, in fact, start right now at this moment with Ambassador Dayal. Ambassador Dayal, just one word, in your view, because there has been so much talk about India's stand of abstention as far as the United Nations resolution is concerned, along with 45 other countries, few of them major economies like Britain and also very close allies of Israel. How do you see this stand of India? Because many have said that this is India deviating, in fact, from its former position.
Certainly not. India has categorically said that it is in favor of a two-state solution, that it favors supporting the rights of the Palestinians. But the resolution was a bit one-sided because it was not mentioning the Hamas attack against Israel on October 7, which started this entire crisis. India had wanted to go along with some countries who wanted to include a mention of that attack on October 7. Now, that was not agreed to. Canada had voted an amendment to include it. It was not included. So we thought that while we support the aspects of the resolution, but there were some additional aspects which ought to have been brought in. Therefore, we abstained. Mind you, we did not vote against the resolution. We were not against the content of what was said in the resolution. We only abstained because we wanted to show our unhappiness at the fact that not everything which ought to have been included was eventually included in the resolution.
Okay. Syed Ruman Hashmi, if you could give our viewers a sense, as far as what is happening in Gaza. There are increasing voices of this collective punishment which has been inflicted on the people on the Gaza Strip. More than 8,000 have died. Israel continues to say that they are only targeting Hamas military commanders, their military, in fact, installation. And this is just a collateral as Hamas is not letting people move out of the Gaza city.
Yeah, first, thanks for having me. I would like to say that Israel, from the beginning of its independence or creation, is facing an existential crisis, and it will be going on until Israel accepts the two-nation theory. See, the 1944 in Jerusalem, in Hotel David, where Rishi Sunak had come over and stayed and to express the solidarity with the Israeli government and the Israeli people. In 1944, organization Irgun bombed that hotel, resulting in the death of 90 people. And Britain put bounty on those leaders who led the Irgun. And ex-Prime Minister, he was leading that organization, and
Right.
Britain declared the terrorist organization. Britain declared terrorists and put the bounty on them. But later on, see the history. He becomes the prime minister after independence of Israel, or creation of Israel. So first thing, the definition of the terrorism, it refers as per our convenience. As a ex-Mossad director admitted in a Gulf News channel that he assisted, the Israel provided the medical facility to Al-Nusra Front, which is in Syria, which was fighting against the Israeli government, and
No,
it is the
sir-
proxy to Al-Qaeda.
Sir, but the fact
Al-Nusra,
remains.
let me complete, please.
No, what I'm trying to
Yes.
say is the fact remains that might be in fact all these agencies making mistakes or using people which which are known as terrorists for their own benefits. But what Hamas has
Yes.
done, it's a classic textbook example of what has happened on October 7th of any terror outfit or spreading terrorism.
No, Ankit, I differ here. It is not a classic example. It as the UN Secretary-General said, it didn't happen in out of blue, right? Right from 70 to 75 years, the Israel has been massacring, has been killing, isolating, trying to dislodge. He uprooted 70 million people from Israel, the first Nakba during 1948,
Okay.
and in 1982, and 1 minute, in 1982, in the two camps of Lebanon, Sabra and Shatila, Israeli army surrounded the camp, and the evangelical, the radical Christians militia entered, and they killed, they butchered 3,000 people.
Sir,
This is the classist textbook.
history is littered
3,000
with
people
examples.
butchered.
There is no one here. There is no one here holding a candle to what the IDF and possibly Mossad must have done in many of their operations. But that doesn't take away from anything that Hamas has done. Butchering women, children, no matter what your cause is, cannot be justified under any circumstances. But Dr. Kinvraj Jahangir, I just want to understand from you at this. Okay, we have lost that line with Dr. Jahangir. We'll try and reconnect with him. Ambassador Dayal, where do you see this conflict now heading? Because it doesn't seem, and despite the UN resolution, so many countries and organizations talking about Israel to, in fact, also be mindful as far as the innocent civilian casualties. There are more than 2,200 children, those who have died on the Gaza Strip. It doesn't seem that Israel is holding back.
Ankit, first of all, I would like to strongly endorse what you said, that the terrorist act committed on the 7th of October by Hamas has to be strongly condemned. Anyone who tries to defend that terrorist act needs to be chastised. Terrorism has no justification. Now, where are things going? I take note of some of the statements made by Benjamin Netanyahu. Firstly, he has said that this will be a long and difficult war. Secondly, he has said that the military is opening a second stage. Thirdly, he has said that the attack could escalate before an even wider land invasion of the area. And fourthly, he has asked the Palestinians in Gaza to move southwards. So what do I expect? I expect that there is going to be an escalation of the conflict. I expect that there will be more casualties and that the hardships of the population of Gaza will increase. Already, there are shortages of medical supplies, food, drinking water, electricity, and more than 2.3 million Palestinians are at risk of starvation and disease. So there is a need to address this humanitarian crisis. There is a need to, first of all, have countries which are supporting Hamas, directly or indirectly. There is a need for them to, first of all, pull up Hamas, get it to return the hostages, and tell them to tell Hamas that it should talk peace. Because otherwise,
Ambassador
Israel
Dayal,
is not going to
may I just play the
de-escalate.
devil's advocate here, and may I just ask you this question? Not the first time that we have seen a large-scale operation. Of course, in terms of the reaction this time and the scope of it, it looks unprecedented with what has happened between Israel and Hamas. But the fact remains, sir, what's a zero-sum game? Israel at this moment is inflicting civilian casualties without any regard for any international law. And this can't just be given a carte blanche, with regard to its response to terrorism. They also, it's a democracy, they also have to play by some international rules.
You're absolutely right. But then Hamas should have factored in its calculation that the military might of Israel is several times more than Hamas's strength. And that the terrorist attack that it was going to carry out would have a severe backlash. Hamas should have realized that. So I think that it is responsible. It is a blunder which Hamas committed, and I attribute the sufferings of the Palestinian people to the act which Hamas committed.
No, there is no doubt about that, but that doesn't mean that Israel gets a blank check to do whatever it wants in garb of responding to Hamas and the militant organization. But I want to the terrorist organization, I want to bring in Dr. Jahangir because we lost his connection. Dr. Jahangir, you are in Tel Aviv. Just give our viewers a sense. What is the end game? What's the zero sum that Israel is looking at after 23 days into this war? More than 8,000 Palestinians have been killed so far. All of them, of course, cannot be Hamas terrorists. I mean, there are citizens, those who are dying in the daily bombing as far as Israel is concerned. What's the end game that Israel is looking at this moment?
Thank you, dear Ankit. In fact, there are many people and some of the families whose family members are captive in Gaza are actually protesting against the government not to bomb Gaza in an indiscriminate manner. I think within Israel there's a very, very important debate about not to punish and let the civilians suffer. Today the water supply has been resumed, but I think what Israel is doing is what most nation states do. They tend to think that terror is a problem that the military and the bombs can solve. I think terrorism of Hamas cannot be solved by Israeli army and its retaliation. Otherwise, for the last 10 years, Israel has been, demolishing tunnels and cleaning the grounds of Hamas operations in Gaza. So I think it's a terrible mistake, and it will really earn difficult questions for the Israeli state to defend itself. But I do agree with Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, where he hinted that how Hamas partly and actually to a great extent is responsible for this tragedy that is falling upon the people of Gaza. I think responsibility of the protection and the responsibility of the well-being of the people of Gaza is much on the shoulders of Hamas than on the shoulders of Israeli state. And I think what makes it very difficult is that we tend to forget that there are 220 captives which are in Gaza. And Israel is repeating its demand again and again that Hamas should return them if Hamas wants ceasefire. Now, Hamas and Islamic Jihad are more interested in getting their 1,000 or 2,000 prisoners from the Israeli jails out in the bargain. So just understand, Hamas right now choosing to liberate its combatants and militants from the Israeli jails that have been imprisoned for the last 10 years, rather than saying, we return your hostages and you stop the war.
Precisely. So
I think we need to...
So in all this, what Hamas has done and what Israel is doing, the price is being paid in blood by the civilians on the Gaza Strip. But Dr. Jahangir, because we lost you earlier, I just want to understand from you on this very, very important point. This proposal that has been once again been floated by some Hamas officials that release our people. Some figure is are quoting 2,000, some are quoting 6,000 Hamas and political prisoners in Israeli jails, and we will release all your hostages. What has been the response as far as the Israeli media, the society, and the politicians at large are concerned there in Israel?
Well, I think it's a difficult thing, but the Prime Minister of Israel has all the worst choices in front of him right now. It has been 20 days, and the families of the captives forced him and the defense minister to meet them, and he found time to meet them yesterday evening. And yesterday evening, after meeting the families of the captives, he came on the national television. He gave the first press conference to the nation. And he promised that we will bring back the prisoners. But it doesn't look like by the actions of the Israeli army, though it is difficult to doubt that they are not looking for the people in Gaza for their hostages. In fact, they released leaflet kind of a thing in Gaza where they announced financial rewards for the people of Gaza to give any information possible that can lead them to the hostages. But I think, Ankit, there is a much bigger point, and I think Syed Hashmi Shahab should really respond to it, because he went on counting the British era terrorism of the Jewish groups.
Yes.
Which, Manishankar Iyer wrote this, I think, very, very problematic piece in the Indian Express, where he said that the original sin came from the Jewish or Zionist terrorism in Palestine. I think it's a very outdated and an unproductive analysis, and Indian left and the intellectuals should really drop it. The problem is much bigger and complex. If we really want to be relevant to either the Israelis or the Palestinians, we need to make really some sensible conversation about it.
Also, like I said, history is littered with such examples, and both sides possibly would not be very proud of what has happened in the last 50, 60 years. But, Syed Ruman Hashmi, Professor Dr. Jahangir was making a point at that moment. Would you like to, in fact, as I said, sir, there are no two ways about the fact that what happened October 7th, no matter what the motivation was, cannot under any circumstances be condoned. It has to be condemned as an act of terror.
Yeah, that's true. Every sane person will acknowledge it, that whatever happens, that the Hamas fighters, they storm into the Israeli territory and they killed and kidnapped many innocent people. So it is highly condemnable. Nobody supports it. But what I was referring to, that it has been happening by the Israeli government and military for the last 70, 75 years. How could we forget the history of first Nakba? This one is going to second Nakba. Recently Netanyahu appeared in the United Nations with one map. And he was mentioning the new corridor from India to Gulf country lead to Israel. And the map of the Palestine was erased there. See, the government of Israel are not ready to accept the Palestine state.
Absolutely.
It is the utter violation. It is utter violation of the Oslo and even the Abraham Accord. It is mentioned also in Abraham Accord.
Okay.
Which was Netanyahu was party of it.
Ambassador Dayal, does this conflict, Dr. Jahangir, I'm coming to you, for your conclusion, but Ambassador Dayal, just very quickly, I just wanted to understand from you, does this in a way also expose the position as far, or the power as far as the United Nations is concerned? I mean, whether it's Ukraine, Russia, or in fact this current conflict, it's more text and more words, but nothing what the United Nations would possibly hope translates onto the ground, sir.
Ankit, the United Nations is an incompetent body, and the P5 use it for their own narrow, selfish interests. They use the veto power to counter any move which is unsuitable to them. And for this reason, the United Nations Security Council is stymied, it is ineffective, it is not able to make any contribution towards maintenance of global peace. Now, I just want to say one thing.
Yes.
Politics is the art of the possible. Surely, everybody wants the Palestinians to have their rights. India has been supporting a two-state theory.
Okay.
But you're not going to achieve that through violence because Israel is much more powerful. The art of the possible is through negotiations, which the Palestinians, particularly the Hamas, never seems to realize.
Okay.
That is unfortunate. And unless violence is given up by Hamas, I don't see a Palestinian state taking shape.
With apologies, I'm completely out of time. And in India could also be a great example for how the means of a free nations can in fact be achieved through non-violence means. But Having said that, that doesn't erase the problems that are plaguing Middle East, plaguing both these countries, and of course what has led to this moment. Yes, Hamas is responsible, but the question would be, what about West Bank, what about Jerusalem and Ramallah, where there is no Hamas, and still Palestinians find themselves staring the barrel of the Israeli gun every other day. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us with your inputs on this very, very important discussion.